Welcome to today's historical deep dive into the stark, astonishing reality of everyday life in the Middle Ages. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's a world defined by forces far older than kings and castles. The relentless rhythm of the sun and seasons, the brutal caprice of illness and hunger, and the quiet, desperate struggle for survival shared by millions whose names history rarely bothers to record. This isn't a fairy tale. It's dirt, sweat, and the constant nagging awareness of your own fragility. We're going to strip back the myths and step directly into the rough-spun clothing of a person who lived and died in this vanished world. What did they feel? What did they fear? What kept them going when everything conspired to break them? If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Bringing more of these lost stories to light. And as we journey back, drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Would you be a farmer praying for rain, a craftsman honing his skill, or perhaps someone whispering spells against the evil eye? Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The Cold Awakening. You wake to the sound of coughing and the rustle of damp straw. The air is thin and cold, biting at your exposed skin through threadbare layers. There is no glass in the window opening, just a wooden shutter you keep latched against the night's chill and whatever unseen things, wolves perhaps, or maybe even darker spirits whispered about by the elders, might roam outside your small wattle-and-daub hut. The fire in the central hearth died hours ago, leaving only a heap of gray ash that seems to mock the very notion of warmth. Your hands, calloused and stiff from yesterday's toil in the field, search instinctively for a thicker patch of straw on the floor you share with your family, a corner where the cold isn't quite so absolute. This is not just a house. It's a shared space, a fragile ecosystem of survival. You hear the low snuffling of the pig tethered in the corner, its warmth radiating faintly, a living heat source. Overhead, the few chickens roosting nervously shift, their soft clucks, a constant presence. Their warmth is minimal, their presence a constant reminder of your meager wealth, your essential interdependence with creatures you will eventually eat or trade at the local market, if you can even get there. The smells are thick and layered, stale smoke clinging to the walls and your clothes, damp earth from the floor, animal musk, the faint, persistent odor of human waste from the pot near the door that serves as your chamber pot. There is no luxury here, not even the luxury of privacy or silence. Every breath you take is visible in the frigid air, a small cloud hanging before it dissipates. Every tiny sound, a scuttling mouse, a child's whimper, the pig grunting, tells you that you are not alone in this small, dark box you call home. This is the start of your day, exactly like every other day you can remember, stretching back through your 14 years. An age that feels like many lifetimes, compressed into one long struggle against the elements. The gnawing emptiness in your belly, and the ever-present threat of sickness or injury. The world outside is still shrouded in pre-dawn gloom, a place where real dangers, like bandits and famine, mingle uneasily with imagined ones conjured by superstition. Goblins in the woods, curses carried on the wind. But the danger inside is also profoundly real. The pervasive, bone-deep cold that steals your energy, and the ever-present specter of hunger that defines your existence. Getting up from this inadequate bed of straw requires a conscious act of will, a difficult push against the inertia of exhaustion and discomfort. The alternative, however, is worse. Lying here achieving nothing, earning no bread, gathering no fuel. And in this world, doing nothing is a swift, certain path to ruin, a path that ends not just in hunger, but in death. Was it divine grace or sheer desperation that got people out of this inadequate warmth each morning? The ache is the first thing you know. It settles in your belly before the dawn, a dull, familiar throb that tells you the night has passed and the struggle begins anew. Beside you, the rough straw rustles as your youngest shifts, a thin whimper escaping their lips. They feel it too. Hunger is not a temporary visitor in this life. It is a constant companion, a quiet weight that presses down on every hour. You rise, fingers clumsy and stiff in the pre-dawn chill. The fire died hours ago. On the rough-hewn table sits the loaf, not the golden, airy bread of the Lord's table, but a dark, heavy mass made from rye or barley, mixed with whatever fillers stretched the precious grain. Peas, beans, sometimes even ground acorns or the stalks of chaff, when the harvest was poor or the rent too high. You break off a piece. It resists your touch, hard and unyielding. Chewing is a labor, trying to coax sustenance from the dense dough. It tastes of the earth, of grit, and of maybe there is a pot on the cold hearth, holding the remains of last night's meal, a weak, thin stew of root vegetables pulled from the winter earth, parsnips, leeks, perhaps a few wizened cabbage leaves. If you are blessed by some unknown grace, there might be a scrap of dried fish, pungent and salty, a tiny boost against the gnawing void. Meat is a dream, a feast reserved for the highest holy days, or the dangerous gamble of a hunt that risks the Lord's savage punishment if you are caught on his land. Milk, cheese, eggs. These are treasures, often bartered for other necessities or given as rent, owed to the manor. Your diet is a relentless monotony, a gray landscape of insufficient calories and missing nutrients. You know nothing of scurvy or rickets, only that bodies grow weak, teeth loosen and fall, and that the wasting sickness claims many, particularly the young and the old, fading like smoke in a perpetual draft. Death isn't always sudden, like the plague. Sometimes it is a slow, quiet diminishment. After months of the belly's constant ache, this daily, hourly struggle isn't merely about filling a stomach. It shapes your entire world. Every seed you plant, every hour you spend bent double in the fields, every tool you mend, every item you trade in the village, it is all measured against this fundamental, primal need to feed yourself and your family. There is no eating for pleasure, no simple enjoyment of a meal. You eat to live, and living, you understand with every ache and tremor, is hard work. It's a cruel irony. The land is rich, worked by your hand, yet it gives just enough, barely enough, to keep you tethered to the soil, forever hungry. This relentless hunger dictates morality in subtle, profound ways. It sharpens eyes for opportunity, breeds a fierce protectiveness over your meager store, and sometimes pushes good people to desperate acts. You see your neighbor eye your small patch of beans with a look you understand instinctively. Does hunger justify theft? Does it make a sin less grievous in the eyes of God, who surely knows the belly's gnawing? Or does the fear of eternal damnation preached from the pulpit outweigh even the screams of an empty stomach? This constant negotiation between survival and soul is whispered not just in prayers, but in the silent language of shared hardship and suspicious glances across the village green. Ask yourself, in a world where every calorie is a victory and every day is a fight against the void, where does faith end and sheer animalistic survival begin? Would you share your last crust or hoard it, praying for a miracle you have little reason to expect? The gray light barely chases the shadows as you push open the rough-hewn door. The chill air, a shock after the peat smoke inside. A stream of figures, cloaked against the dawn, moves towards the fields that ring the village like a frayed halo. Here is your world laid out, not in neat squares, but in long, irregular strips. A patchwork quilt stitched by generations of toil. Some strips are yours, passed down through your bloodline. Others belong to your neighbors, their fates entwined with yours in this shared struggle. It's a dance of brute force and weary patience. The rhythmic scrape of the plowshare against stone, a constant reminder of the land's resistance. Or perhaps you walk the rows, bending double for hours, pulling stubborn weeds that steal the life from the young grain. Your fingers are raw, split. The sun beats down, relentless. Later comes the harvest, the true test, a frantic race against the darkening skies and the threat of sudden rain or early frost. You swing the sickle, a timeless arc, cutting stalks until your wrist aches and your hands bleed from the rough stubble. Sheaves are bound, heavy bundles lifted repeatedly, each one a prayer for a full granary. There are no clever machines here, no alchemical powders to banish pests or enrich the earth. Only the strength of human muscle, the slow power of beasts, ancient tools worn smooth by countless hands, and the utterly capricious mercy of nature. Your life's drumbeat is the turning of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, the blessing or curse of rain and frost. A late frost can wither the fragile sprouts, a year's food supply lost in a single cruel night. A drought can bake the earth to dust, bringing the specter of famine to your door. A sudden deluge can flatten the ripening grain, turning golden hope into muddy rot. You watch the sky with the intensity of a hawk, reading omens in the clouds, praying to saints, and perhaps whispering older, less Christian entreaties for favor. You understand, in a way city folk or nobles never could, your primal, terrifying dependence on the natural world. This ceaseless labor is not just how you eat, it is who you are. You are bound to this land, your identity forged in its soil, its fortunes mirrored in the lines etched on your face. There is a quiet, profound dignity in this ancient connection, but also a chilling vulnerability. Was this utter dependence on the earth a form of profound faith, or simply the cruelest kind of chains? Your survival is measured in bushels, and the weather is your master. Your village is your world. A cluster of low, smoke-stained huts huddled around the solid stone of the church, perhaps the larger, more imposing structure of the manor house looming nearby, all encircled by the vast, demanding open fields. There is no anonymity here. None. Everyone knows your name, your father's name, your grandmother's sins, the price of your last trade, the sickness that plagues your youngest. Your life is not a solitary thread. It is interwoven, tangled, knotted with every other soul in this small, muddy clearing in the wilderness. This density is inescapable. It is the air you breathe. You share the same worn tools, passing a shovel or a saw from hand to hand. The great moments of the year, the back-breaking joy of harvest, the nervous expectation of planting, are not individual tasks, but communal struggles, fought shoulder to shoulder against the soil and the seasons. When disaster strikes, it is a collective wound. If a barn catches fire, everyone runs with buckets, battling the flames, not just for the farmer whose livelihood is burning, but for the village itself. When the sweating sickness grips a neighbor's family, you bring what little food you can spare, whispering prayers, fearing the plague might already be walking towards your own door. This closeness is a form of mutual insurance, a safety net woven from shared hardship in a world where no other safety exists. But this knot of lives can chafe and bind. Disputes are venomous precisely because they are so personal. A boundary stone moved a foot in the night. A chicken stolen from a coop. Harsh words exchanged at the well. These fester, poisoning the shared air. There are no lawyers, no distant courts. These conflicts are settled by the village elder or the Lord's reeve, often through public humiliation or harsh physical punishment. Reputation is not just important, it is your currency, your shield, your vulnerability. A single act of shame, petty theft, public drunkenness, a suspected dalliance, can cling to you like a shroud, marking you in the eyes of everyone you will ever know. There is no escape from the watchful gaze, the quiet judgment that follows you from your hovel to the church steps. This intense social pressure, while providing a vital safety net, also stifles individuality. You are measured by your contribution to the collective, your willingness to adhere to tradition, your standing within this small, interconnected web. To stand out, to question, to seek a different path, is to risk severing the very bonds that ensure your survival. The bonds forged in shared terror and labor are strong, sometimes stronger than blood. But the tensions simmering beneath the surface, born of scarcity and constant proximity, can erupt with devastating speed. This village is both your sanctuary from the wolves and the outside world, and your prison, limiting your horizons to the nearby woods and the next field. It is the only home you have ever known, and most likely, the only one you ever will know. Ask yourself, would you survive without choice, or bend just enough to fit the mold? Section 5. Faith and Daily Fear. The massive wooden doors of the church creak open on Sunday morn, spilling gray light into the nave. You shuffle in with your neighbors, the familiar scent of stale incense and cold stone filling your lungs. The building stands at the village's heart, not just a structure of wood and mortar, but the very core of your world, physically and spiritually. You attend Mass every week, standing awkwardly on the packed earth floor. Eyes may be drifting to the crudely painted images of saints, or the terrifying depictions of sinners writhing in eternal fire. You hear the priest intone the ancient words in Latin, a language you barely understand, but the meaning is conveyed through the solemn weight of the ritual. The low murmuring responses and the stern pronouncements from the pulpit. Your faith is not some abstract idea debated in distant halls. It is a palpable, tangible force that governs every breath. God is terrifyingly real, powerful, and judging, watching your every move. The devil is equally real, a sinister presence lurking in the shadows of the woods, in the dark corners of your own heart, tempting you to sin with subtle whispers and treacherous thoughts. Angels and demons battle constantly for your immortal soul, a cosmic war fought in the hidden spaces of your daily struggle. You fear damnation more than sickness, more than hunger, more than the cold grip of winter. This profound terror makes confession a necessary ritual, not just a suggestion. It is your only chance, offered periodically, to cleanse yourself of the sins you inevitably commit in your relentless struggle to survive. A sharp word born of hunger, a covetous glance at a neighbor's slightly better patch of land, a moment of despair that verges on doubt. You pray constantly, kneeling by the hearth before a simple crucifix, head bowed in the fields, whispering pleas before sleep. You beg for a good harvest that will see you through the winter, for health against the ever-present threat of fever and plague, for protection from the unseen evil that seems to press in from all sides, for the souls of your departed loved ones, swallowed by the earth. Saints are not distant figures in stories. They are intermediaries with specific skills, allies in the fight. Saint Anthony offers hope against the agonizing fire of skin diseases. Saint Anthony, Sebastian is invoked desperately when the coughing sickness spreads through families. Saint Isidore the laborer is petitioned for good crops, the very foundation of life. You light flickering candles, offer small, precious offerings of grain or a single egg. Embark on local pilgrimages to nearby shrines, hoping to gain their powerful favor. This deep, pervasive faith provides a singular comfort and meaning in a world saturated with uncertainty and suffering. It offers the only truly bright light, the hope of a better life after death. A stark contrast to the relentless, grinding hardship of your earthly existence. Heaven is the ultimate harvest, the promise of eternal rest and joy. But this comfort comes at a steep price. It instills a profound, inescapable sense of fear and guilt, a constant, gnawing awareness of your own inherent sinfulness and the terrifying, unpredictable consequences of God's wrath. Your morality is not debated or reasoned through. It is dictated, absolute and inflexible, by the Church. Breaking its rules carries a weight far heavier than any physical burden. The weight of an eternity in hell. Was this intense faith truly a shield against the darkness of the world? Or did it simply trade one form of terror, famine, sickness, violence, for another, promising heaven only in exchange for constant, soul-crushing fear of hell? The sun isn't yet a promise on the horizon, but the chill in your small dwelling has already found your bones. Another day arises, not bringing freedom, but service. You do not own this patch of earth you scratch a living from. It belongs to the Lord of the Manor, a name spoken with a mix of deference and dread. He, in turn, owes his own fealty higher up the chain, to a baron, an earl, perhaps even the king himself. Your family's claim on this land is conditional, tied not to ownership, but to endless obligation. The rhythm of your life is dictated by these dues. There is the rent, paid not in coin, which you rarely see, but in the very fruits of your labor, baskets of grain, bundles of hay, perhaps chickens or eggs. Then there are the labor services, the days you must spend working the Lord's own land, the domain, while your own crops wait, praying for good weather you cannot afford to waste. Add to this the fees and fines for using his mill, his oven, for inheritance, or for merely existing in a way he dislikes. It is a web of payments that ensnares your every move. Harvest time, the period that should bring relief and security after months of relentless toil, is often the most anxiety-ridden. You watch the wheat ripen, the barley swell, knowing most of it is not for you. The moment the crops are gathered, counted, measured, the reeve arrives. The Lord's share comes first, a portion that feels enormous, perhaps a third or more, carted away to fill his granaries, while yours remain pitifully bare. And then the church, the tithe, a tenth of everything you produce, demanded by the priest, a sacred tax meant to soothe your soul, but often starving your body. Only after these demands are met are you left with what remains. You calculate frantically, fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Is there enough left to feed your wife, your children, until the next harvest? Is there enough seed grain set aside to plant for next year? If the harvest was poor, due to too much rain, too little sun, blight, or pests, the answer is often a stark, terrifying no. You might starve, even after paying your dues. This is the constant, grinding anxiety, a weight that presses down from above, threatening to crush you. The Lord's word is your law. He holds court in the manor hall, settles disputes, punishes transgressions. His power feels absolute within his domain. You are tied to this land, unable to leave the village without his express permission, effectively his property in all but name. This system, known as manorialism or feudalism, offers a fragile promise of stability. The Lord is supposed to protect you from raiders or external threats, a shield against a violent world. Yet, it is fundamentally, undeniably exploitative. Your life's energy, your sweat and blood poured into the earth, enriches others, leaving you perpetually teetering on the edge of subsistence. The very idea of rising above your station is almost unimaginable. You were born a peasant, and a peasant you will almost certainly die. Your life, its energy, its fruits, its direction, a significant, crushing portion of it belongs not to you, but to another. Ask yourself, if your security depended on absolute obedience, would you fight for a freedom you might never know? Or bend just enough to fit the mold, praying it doesn't break you? You dip your rough wooden spoon into the bowl. It's thin, a watery stew of boiled barley and whatever root vegetables were stored through the winter. Turnip, maybe a few hard onions salvaged from the root cellar. It fills the belly, a little, but the gnawing returns quickly. Food is not convenience here. It is the very breath in your lungs, the measure of your worth in this world. Survival doesn't mean thriving. It means not starving. And the shape of your survival is carved entirely by the seasons, by the indifferent turn of the earth. Spring arrives less as a gentle awakening and more as a desperate scramble. The winter stores are low, maybe gone. Every green shoot poking through the damp earth is eyed with hungry hope. Dandelions, nettles, young shoots from the hedgerows, boiled, often bitter, but they are food. They bring the fleeting promise of renewal, a break from the monotony of grain. Summer deepens this hope. Your small garden plot, perhaps just a few square feet near the cottage, yields cabbage, onions, peas, beans. It's meager, vulnerable to pests and blight, but it adds variety, a splash of color to the endless gray of porridge and pottage. This is also the time of anxious anticipation, eyes scanning the fields. The grain grows tall, the heart of the harvest, the difference between life and death come winter, autumn. This is the brief, glorious period of relative plenty. The harvest is brought in, aching backs stacking sheaves, grain threshed and stored away. Apples fall from the trees. Nuts are gathered from the woods. If you are lucky, truly blessed, a pig might be slaughtered. The smell of roasting meat is rare, intoxicating. Every scrap is used, nothing wasted. This bounty is celebrated, not just with feasts, but with a profound, bone-deep relief. A full belly is a physical sensation tied not to satiety, but to gratitude, to the knowledge that you might make it through the coming lean times. This abundance is fleeting. It must last. Then winter clamps down. The earth is hard, unproductive. You live on the stored grain, the salted meat, if you have it, to dried beans, the rock-hard cheese. Hunger is seasonal, yes, predictable in its timing, but the fear of it is a constant companion, a cold knot in the gut. A bad summer, too much rain, too little sun, blight in the fields. That doesn't just mean less food. It means death, come January or February. The concept of a balanced diet is unknown, a luxury beyond imagining. You eat what the land gives, when it gives it, praying it is enough. This desperate reliance makes feasts not just social gatherings, but vital celebrations of having enough, if only for a moment. Contrast this with your own world, where any fruit, any meat, any spice is available year-round, shipped from continents away. You eat because you are hungry, or bored, or celebrating. You don't eat because the alternative is the gnawing emptiness that never truly leaves. For them, every meal, however humble, was a small, hard-won victory against the pervasive, existential threat of starvation. Ask yourself, what would your relationship with food be if every meal felt like a reprieve, a temporary warding off of the wolf at the door? Would you see holiness in a loaf of bread? Would you steal to feed your family, knowing the sin? Their lives were stripped bare of choice, of convenience, leaving only the raw, primal act of survival, etched into their bodies and souls by the rhythms of the sun and the soil. The chill in the air settles deep in your bones, a familiar ache. A persistent cough racks your chest, stealing your breath. Sickness is not an event here. It is a season, a constant visitor that knocks on every door, sometimes lingering, sometimes taking someone with it. Colds bloom into chest fires, stomach cramps seize you mid-harvest, skin infections fester from simple scrapes. Every cut is a gamble, every fever a negotiation with fate. You watch children born and die within days, their small lungs failing, their tiny bodies succumbing to the unknown. And childbirth itself? It is a battlefield. The screams echo from behind closed doors, a sound that chills even the bravest man. You've seen women bleed away their lives, seen babies born blue and silent, seen the toll on those who survive, damaged bodies, the quiet grief carved onto their faces. There are no grand halls filled with learned men wielding scalpels and strange gleaming tools. No potions brewed with precision in sterile labs. The understanding of the body is rudimentary, bound by ancient beliefs of humors unbalanced, of bad air, of vengeful spirits. When sickness strikes, you turn first to the wisdom of the earth and the strength of your faith. Your mother taught you which leaves to crush for a headache. Your grandmother which roots to boil for a cough. Poultices made of herbs gathered under specific moon phases are slapped onto wounds. Concoctions are brewed, thick and bitter, sometimes working, sometimes doing nothing. And sometimes you endure the unsettling sight of leeches attached to your skin, believed to draw out the offending humors that plague you. It's a desperate gamble, often more ceremony than cure, yet it is all you have. But equally potent is the unseen world. Is this fever a punishment for a harsh word spoken in anger? Did that coughing fit come from encountering a malevolent spirit lurking near the woods? You pray fervently, lighting candles before the statue of a saint known for healing, making promises you hope the divine will remember. Exorcism is sometimes attempted for ailments believed to be demonic in origin, a terrifying ritual of shouts and holy water meant to drive out the unwelcome guest. The line between the physical and the spiritual is blurred, perhaps non-existent. Every ache could be the devil's work. Every recovery, God's grace. It is ironic, isn't it? The deepest faith often coexists with the most profound fear. Was it faith that healed them, you wonder? Or simply the body's own resilience, coupled with the sheer, terrifying will to survive another day? In your village, the healer is likely Ilara, an older woman with gnarled hands and eyes that have seen too much sorrow and too little joy. She knows the forests and fields like the back of her hand, can identify which plant will soothe a burn or induce vomiting. Her knowledge is a precious inheritance passed down through whispers and practice. She mixes practical remedies with whispered charms, with protective amulets, with strict instructions about avoiding certain places or people lest the illness return. Her skills are respected, sometimes even revered, but everyone understands their limits. When the fever grips too tightly, when the bleeding won't stop, when the wound festers black, even Ilara can only offer comfort, prayer, and perhaps a draught of cheap wine to dull the agony. Severe injury, a broken limb from a fall, a deep cut from an axe, is a death sentence in waiting. There are no surgeons to mend shattered bones properly, no way to stop the relentless march of infection. Pain is not managed, it is endured. You grit your teeth, bite on leather, or drink whatever potent brew is available until unconsciousness offers a brief, brutal respite. This constant proximity to suffering and the swift, often random nature of death shapes everything. You live with a greater acceptance of pain, of illness, of mortality than most people in the modern world could ever comprehend. While we fight death with every fiber of our being, extending life with science and medicine, the medieval peasant accepted it as an inevitable, often sudden end. It wasn't a failure to be fought, but a certainty to be met, perhaps with dread, perhaps with resignation, perhaps with a fragile hope for what lay beyond. They did not expect long, comfortable lives free from suffering. They expected to live and die, often sooner rather than later. Their bodies fragile vessels, in a harsh, unpredictable world. They learned, in their own way, to live with the constant presence of death, seeing it not as a distant concept, but as a neighbor just outside the door. Ask yourself, how does a soul adapt when death is not an abstract fear, but a shadow that walks beside you, touching everyone you know? Does it crush you, or does it sharpen your focus on the fleeting moments of light? The air inside clings to you, thick and smoky, a constant companion that stings your eyes and coats your tongue. This is your home, less a refuge than a shell against the wind and rain. It's built simply, truthfully, from what the land offers. Rough-cut timbers hewn from the nearby woods, woven branches plastered with mud and animal dung for walls, wattle and daub, practical and fragile. Above you, bundles of thatch, dried reeds or straw, make a roof that leaks in the worst storms, but mostly keeps the sky out. The floor is just the earth itself, tamped down hard, turning to dust underfoot in the dry months, and a sticky, unavoidable mud when it rains. At the heart of this space, quite literally, is the hearth, a shallow pit dug into the packed earth floor where the fire burns, the sole source of heat, light, and the place where food is cooked. There is no chimney, no clever stone flue to draw the smoke away. Instead, a simple hole in the roof or perhaps a gap in the gables allows some smoke to escape, but much of it hangs low, swirling and clinging, a gray veil that stains everything: the walls, the rafters, the few possessions you own, even the air you breathe. It's the smell of survival, the smell of warmth against the biting cold outside. But it's also the smell of perpetual discomfort, a gritty layer that settles on your skin and hair. Furniture is minimal, built for necessity, not ease. A rough-hewn table, often little more than a thick plank on unsteady legs, serves for shared meals. A few low stools or maybe a bench line the walls. There might be a single chest, crudely made, where you store your few worldly goods, spare tunics, tools, perhaps a treasured religious token or a small inheritance. When night falls, you unroll straw mattresses onto the floor. Privacy is a foreign concept. You sleep huddled together, the warmth of bodies, human and sometimes animal, your only defense against the chill that seeps up from the earth floor. There are no separate rooms, no quiet corners to retreat to. Every moment is shared, every sound heard. Light is a precious, fleeting thing. During the day, what little light there is streams through the single doorway, or perhaps a small, unglazed opening in the wall, covered with a shutter in bad weather. After sunset, the darkness is profound, broken only by the weak, flickering glow of a rushlight, a reed dipped in tallow or grease, or a tallow candle, an expensive item used sparingly. The cost of light dictates the rhythm of life. Work ends when the sun dips below the horizon, and evenings are spent in dim, smoky proximity, whispering stories or reciting prayers learned by heart. There is no running water, no concept of sanitation as you would understand it. Water must be carried from the village well or nearby stream, heavy buckets slopped back and forth, multiple times a day for drinking, cooking, and the most basic washing. A quick rinse of hands and face, perhaps, if water can be spared. Waste is collected in a pot near the door, to be emptied periodically onto the midden heap outside, a breeding ground for flies and disease. Vermin are constant companions. The rustle of rats in the thatch at night, fleas biting relentlessly, lice in your hair and clothes. Cleaning is rudimentary, sweeping the floor with a rough broom, perhaps. But the dirt, the soot, the smells are ingrained, inescapable. Your home is not a place of comfort or retreat. It is a functional shelter, built for the most fundamental needs, keeping out the weather, providing a place to sleep and cook. It demands constant effort, patching the roof, reinforcing walls, tending the fire. It offers almost no privacy, no personal space. The modern idea of a home as a sanctuary, a reflection of your individual taste, or a place for quiet solitude, is utterly alien. Your dwelling is a physical manifestation of your place in the world. Humble, collective, defined by necessity. It is a constant reminder that survival is a shared endeavor, and that individual expression in this life is a luxury few can afford or even imagine. Ask yourself, in a world where even your shelter offers no escape, where do you truly find peace? Or does the very notion of peace simply not exist outside the promise of heaven? This shared, smoky space, perpetually on the edge of discomfort and hardship, is where life happens, where birth cries mingle with animal noises, where deaths are witnessed without fanfare, where the cycle of work and rest is dictated not by clocks, but by the sun, the seasons, and the needs of the body. It is a testament to resilience, built not for dreams, but simply for existing. The air grows colder as the sun dips below the ridge. Your hands, rough and calloused from a life spent in the earth, knot together in your lap. Tonight, for you, marriage is a contract written not on parchment, but in the soil, measured by the size of land holdings and the strength of backs. Your parents choose, weighing the potential groom's father's reputation. Is he known for diligence or drink, and the number of able hands they bring to the union? It is a business deal, a merger of two small farms to ensure the continuity of labor and the consolidation of precious land. This alliance binds families together, weaving new threads into the tight tapestry of the village. There is a quiet melancholy here. You will marry a stranger, or perhaps a boy you've known only in passing since childhood, seen at market or church. There is no expectation of romantic love at the outset, only duty and necessity. Yet sometimes, a quiet affection blossoms over shared meals and whispered worries about the harvest or the looming shadow of plague. Love is expressed not through grand gestures, but through the shared burden of survival, hauling wood together, mending clothes by firelight, protecting one another from the harshness of the world. The irony hangs heavy in the air. The most intimate of bonds, forged first in pragmatism, not passion, and children. Children are not merely a blessing, They are your future, your workforce, your only hope against destitution in old age. From the moment they can walk, they have tasks: fetching water, scaring crows from the field, watching younger siblings. Childbirth is a frequent visitor, and a terrifying one. Superstition wraps around it like mist. Charms are placed, saints prayed to desperately against the unseen forces that could steal mother or child. It is a blood ritual, fraught with peril. The bells toll often for infants, tiny coffins barely holding their forms. Every family knows this grief. You weep, you mourn, but life pushes forward. The living must be fed. Family life is a hierarchy dictated by the demands of survival. The husband, head of the household, makes the final decisions regarding the farm and dealings outside the home. But the wife is the linchpin within it, managing the meager stores, birthing and raising the children, tending the vital kitchen garden that can mean the difference between hunger and sustenance, and often helping in the fields during crucial planting and harvest times. Her labor is invaluable, yet rarely acknowledged as equal in status. It is a constant, grueling partnership born of necessity. There are moments of simple joy, a successful harvest feast, a quiet evening, sharing stories passed down through generations, the comfort of familiar faces in a world filled with uncertainty. But the shadow of hardship is always present, shaping every interaction. Ask yourself, would you embrace a love built on duty and shared struggle? Or would the absence of personal choice feel like a cage you could never escape? Your family is your world, bound by blood, sweat, and the relentless, unyielding drive to simply endure. The ache in your shoulders is a constant companion, a dull throb that begins with the dawn and only truly eases into the oblivion of sleep. Each day bleeds into the next, a relentless cycle of earth, sweat, and the gnawing fear of hunger or sickness. The world is harsh, unforgiving, a test set by powers you can only appease with fervent prayers and hopeful superstitions. Yet, even here, in the shadow of the plague and the constant demand of the soil, life manages to find cracks to grow through, small pockets of light. The bell rings, not for prayer this time, but signaling a feast day, a blessed pause in the rhythm of endless labor. You straighten your back, the pain a familiar friend, and feel a spark flicker within you. It's not comfort, not safety, but something akin to hope. The village gathers, a rough, often quarrelsome collection of souls, bound by shared hardship and proximity. There is music, often just a clumsy drumbeat and a reedy pipe, but it's music nonetheless, a sound that stirs tired feet and makes the air feel lighter. People dance, clumsy and joyful, forgetting for a few hours the mud on their clothes, the lice in their hair, the cold in their bones. And then there is the ale, brewed in someone's home, usually weak and cloudy, tasting faintly of the barrel. It is more nourishing than the often polluted water and safer to drink. You hold the roughly made pottery cup, the liquid sloshing gently, and take a deep draught. It warms you from the inside, loosens the tightness in your chest, draws laughter from neighbors you usually only nod grimly at. It is a simple magic, a temporary forgetting, a communal sigh of relief shared over shared cups. Around the fire in the evenings, when the light fails entirely and the beasts are secured, the stories come out. Tales of saints performing miracles, of ancient heroes, of the mischievous fey folk who might steal an unbaptized child, or the terrifying omens that foretell death. These are not mere entertainment. They are the history, the morality lessons, the shared understanding of the world, passed down word by word through generations. Your voice joins the chorus, adding a detail, laughing at a familiar turn of phrase. In the flickering light, surrounded by faces you know better than your own, there is a profound sense of belonging. Even in the quietest moments, the world offers solace. The sudden liquid melody of a blackbird from a thorny bush, the overwhelming scent of flowering wild garlic in the woods, the way the low sun catches the tops of the grain fields, turning them to rippling gold. These flashes of beauty are sharp, poignant, made more precious by the surrounding grime and struggle. They are reminders that life persists, that seasons turn, that even in a world marked by scarcity and the constant shadow of death, there is a resilience, not just in humans, but in the earth itself. Ask yourself, is this finding of joy amidst brutal reality a sign of profound, unbreakable spirit? Or is it merely a necessary adaptation, a bending to the relentless pressure, a quiet refusal to be completely crushed? They found pleasure not in possession or luxury, but in connection, in the simple warmth of human presence, in the brief, fragile moments where the fear loosened its grip. These were not extravagant celebrations. They were essential acts of survival. Reminders that even a life defined by hardship was still a life worth living. Moment by precious moment, the heavy oak doors of the Lord's Hall stand open, a darker rectangle against the gray light filtering through high, narrow windows. The air inside is thick with the scent of cold stone, old rushes, and the nervous sweat of assembled villagers. This is the Lord's court, the final fearsome arbiter when village whispers and elder council fail to mend a broken fence, settle a disputed inheritance of a single goat, or address the raw wound of a neighbor's malice. You stand, or perhaps sit stiffly on a bench near the back, watching the drama unfold. This is not the grand abstract justice of later ages. This is the Lord's justice, rooted in the ancient soil of custom, the whim of the moment, and the absolute weight of his authority. He sits upon his raised chair, the Lord himself, or more likely his steward, a man whose power is borrowed, but feels just as real, just as crushing. Before him, two figures shuffle, faces pale, hands clasped tight. Their dispute is simple: a boundary stone moved, a few stolen chickens. Words exchanged that drew blood. They state their cases, haltingly, perhaps bringing a witness or two who nod vigorously or shift their weight nervously. The steward listens, his face unreadable, occasionally consulting a man nearby who remembers the customs of their fathers and their fathers before them. But ultimately, the decision rests not on written law, for there is little you would recognize as such, but on precedent, the Lord's mood, and often, frankly, on who can afford the heftiest fine. Punishment, when it comes, is swift and meant to be seen. It is not about making things right in some abstract sense, but about restoring order, deterring future transgressions, and reinforcing who holds the power. Fines are common, and they are a drain. A shilling here for being drunk and disorderly. A few hens there for letting your pig wander into a neighbor's patch. Money, or goods that could become money for the Lord, flows ever upwards. Minor offenses might earn you a few hours or a day in the stocks in the village square. A spectacle for the scorn and rotten vegetables of your peers. Public humiliation meant to shame you back into line. More serious crimes, you avert your eyes when the steward speaks of theft or serious violence. The loss of a hand, an ear, or worse, the walk to the gallows tree just outside the village limits. A grim spectacle intended to freeze the blood and imprint the consequences of defiance or desperation upon the minds of all who watch. There is no concept here of rights as you understand them now. You have obligations to the land, to your family, to the church, and above all, to the Lord. Your life, your meager property, your very liberty is, to a significant extent, at His mercy. The system reinforces your place, low down in the great chain of being, dependent on the goodwill, or at least the lack of ill will, from those above you. The wise know that involving the Lord's court is a last, desperate resort. It is better, infinitely better, to suffer a small wrong or find a way to settle matters locally, perhaps with the priest's help or the oldest villager's wisdom, than to risk the arbitrary scales of the Lord's justice. This is the medieval reality. Power determines outcome, and punishment is a brutal public sermon. It makes you ask, when your life hangs on a mood, not a law, what does justice truly mean? She lights a candle for her stillborn daughter, not because it changes the past, but because it calms the whispers. Before the milk teeth are fully gone, before your stride is steady, your small hands are expected to contribute. The dawn doesn't just break, it brings tasks. You wake to the chill air, the smell of yesterday's wood smoke clinging to your coarse tunic. A miniature version of your mother's or father's, same rough weave against your skin. Your job today might be simple. Gathering scattered firewood dropped from the cart, fetching water from the stream where the ice crusts the edges in winter, or sitting patiently and often impatiently, shooing birds away from the fragile young shoots in the field with a stick and loud cries. If there are younger siblings, swaddled tight or just learning to crawl, you are their miniature guardian. A human barrier against the hearth's flame or the draft from the door. Formal learning, the kind found in dusty books or within the quiet cloisters of monks. That is a world as distant as Jerusalem, reserved for the vanishingly few boys, marked for the priesthood or service to a faraway lord. Your education is immediate, vital, delivered through calloused hands and weary voices. You learn the rhythm of the seasons, not from a calendar, but from the soil's resistance, the sun's arc, the behavior of livestock. You learn to tie knots, to mend simple tears, to distinguish edible plants from poison, how to milk a cow, how to spin raw wool into thread, how to stir the pot without burning the sparse meal. Above all, you learn to pray, Pater Noster, Ave Maria, not just as ritual, but as a desperate plea against the unseen forces that govern disease, failed harvests, and sudden death. Play exists, of course, chasing friends through the stubble fields, simple games with polished stones or scraps of wood, the fleeting joy of a summer afternoon by the stream. But it is always interwoven with work, always subject to interruption by the call of a parent, the demands of the household. And it ends abruptly. As strength builds in your limbs, as you grow tall enough to reach the upper branches or heft heavier loads, often by the age of 12 or 14, the period of childhood is declared over. You are no longer a helpful child, but a young adult worker. The tasks intensify, the expectations solidify. Look around your village. Count the cradles. Then count the small figures still running, still working. The churchyard holds more tiny graves than adult ones. The fever, the flux, the simple chill that takes hold. Child mortality is a constant, brutal reality. Losing a child is met with profound grief. Yes, a parent's heart is not made of stone, but there is also a certain stoicism, a resignation born of its heartbreaking frequency. Children are essential for labor, for the continuation of the family line, but they are not viewed with the modern lens of precious, vulnerable individuals needing years of sheltered development. They are seen as miniature adults, necessary contributors from their earliest possible age. The concept of adolescence, this period of self-discovery and delayed responsibility, is non-existent. You transition directly from a working child to a working adult. Your identity forged not in exploration or formal schooling, but in the unyielding demands of labor and necessity. Life's harsh demands compress the period of innocence, if such a word even fits, into a brief working prelude to a life defined by the soil, the hearth, and the relentless struggle to simply endure. Ask yourself, would you resent this foreshortened season, this early burden, or would necessity temper expectation, making each brief moment of freedom a treasure beyond measure? Your world ends, not at the horizon, but where the last cultivated field meets the untamed green wall of the forest. This handful of thatched roofs huddled together, this muddy track leading to the next cluster of homes, this is the known universe. The nearest town is a legend you've heard whispered since childhood, a place of stone buildings and noisy markets, perhaps a day's hard walk away if the roads are clear and the wolves aren't hungry. You might travel there once a year, maybe twice, for the great fair or a religious festival, blinking at the sheer scale of it all, the rush of strangers, the smell of spices you can't name. It is a spectacle, a temporary plunge into overwhelming complexity, before you retreat back to the quiet, predictable rhythm of the village. The rest of the world? Other regions, kingdoms you've only heard mentioned in mass. The fabled lands of the Holy Land, or beyond. They are figments woven from travelers' inflated tales, the stern warnings of priests against foreign ways, or the fleeting, awe-inspiring sight of a noble procession passing through the valley, trailing silks and soldiers from places you cannot imagine. These stories are not maps or histories. They are morality plays and fantastical sagas, full of mythical beasts and unimaginable riches, but also brigands, plagues, and perils designed to keep you rooted right where you are. The forest is the immediate unknown, a place of practical resources like firewood and meager foraging, but also the lurking dread of wild boar that can gut a man, outlaws hiding amongst the trees, or the chilling possibility of something older, darker, something the wise women whisper about when the moon is new. Travel is less a journey and more a gamble. The simple act of walking to the next village can mean getting lost as the path vanishes in the mud, or worse, encountering those who prey on the vulnerable, leaving you stripped bare, or worse. The vast majority of souls born into this time will live out their days within a few miles of the very spot they first drew breath. Your understanding of the world's shape, its long, complex history, the sheer variety of human life beyond your own valley is limited entirely by the hills you can see from your fields. This intense insularity builds a powerful bond, a deep, unspoken understanding with your neighbors. They are your safety net, your shared knowledge, your world. Yet this same closeness breeds a profound suspicion of anyone from outside the pale. The stranger with different clothes, the traveling peddler with strange notions, the beggar whose origins are unknown. They carry the scent of the terrifying, uncontrolled outside. The modern luxury of knowing, instantly, what happens continents away, of hopping onto a cart or coach or machine that whisks you safely across landscapes in hours, would be utterly inconceivable. Your knowledge is not broad, spanning oceans and eras, but deep, intimately focused on the texture of the soil, the signs of the weather, the health of your livestock, the specific saints who protect your specific patch of ground. The world outside your tiny, understood circle is not just distant. It feels fundamentally alien, a place of both wondrous possibility you'll never touch and terrifying dangers that could, perhaps, someday spill over your neatly defined edge. Ask yourself, is the safety of knowing only your small world worth the price of never knowing the vastness? Does this profound limitation make life simpler, or merely confine your fears to a smaller cage? It is an existence both deeply rooted and utterly, terrifyingly unbound from most of humanity's shared journey. The bell tolls again. It's not just a sound, but a rhythm of life and death in your village. This time, it's young Thomas, taken by the sweating sickness that swept through just after harvest. He was strong just yesterday. Life here is a flickering candle, easily snuffed out by a chill in the air, a slip of the knife, or the invisible enemy that rides the wind. You've seen death in every form. The silent, gaunt faces of famine, the sudden, brutal end of violence, the terrible agony of a woman lost in childbirth, her lifeblood pooling on the floor she gave life upon. Your own existence feels perpetually balanced on a knife's edge, a truth acknowledged not with despair, but with a quiet, weary acceptance. When the final breath is taken, a transformation occurs, both physical and spiritual. The community gathers. There are no strangers here when death calls. Women, often neighbors skilled in the sad task, gently wash the cooling body. It is a tender, practical act, preparing the vessel for its journey. The body is dressed not in fine clothes, those are for living days or noble tombs, but in a simple, unbleached linen shroud, tied at the feet and head. Laid out perhaps on the rough table in the main room, or carried to the quiet sanctity of the church, the deceased lies exposed, a stark reminder of the fragility of flesh. It's not hidden away. It's a visible part of the cycle, a communal witness to the end of one story. Then comes the wake. It is a paradox of sorrow and communal solidarity. Prayers are whispered, psalms are sung, lifting the soul toward the divine, warding off any lingering dark spirits. But there is also talk, shared food if there is any to spare, and sometimes, notably, drink. Ale flows, easing tongues and perhaps numbing the sharpest edges of grief. It is a pragmatic ritual, marking the passage, yes, but also providing vital comfort to the living. It binds the community together in shared loss and shared remembrance, an instinctive gathering against the cold finality of the grave. It might seem strange, this mix of piety and revelry to modern eyes, but it is deeply human, a recognition that sorrow needs expression, and the living need each other to face the void left behind. The burial takes place swiftly, usually within a day or two. The body is carried to the churchyard, ground made holy by generations of burials, consecrated by the priest to protect the souls within and mark them as part of the Christian flock. This is crucial. To be buried outside consecrated ground is a terrible fate, a mark of shame or a sign of an unchristian soul. The grave itself is simple, dug deep by neighbors' hands. Your own grave, when the time comes, will be just a mound of earth, perhaps marked by a crude wooden cross with your name, if you are lucky enough to have one carved. No stone effigy, no grand inscription, just a return to the soil from whence you came, awaiting the trumpet call of resurrection on the last day. The rich may rest in stone tombs inside the church itself, closer to God's altar, a spatial representation of earthly hierarchy extending into the grave. But for you, the earth of the churchyard, blessed and held sacred, is enough. It signifies your belonging, your hope. Your faith teaches that death is not an end, but a terrifying transition. The soul faces immediate judgment. Heaven, with its promised eternal bliss in God's presence. Hell, a place of unimaginable torment, filled with devils and fire. A stark warning painted on the church wall for all to see. Or for most souls, purgatory, a place of cleansing fire, where sins not fully atoned for in life are purged before entry into heaven is possible. And this is where the living hold power, where belief shapes action. Prayers for the dead are not just comfort. They are seen as vital interventions. Every paternoster, every Ave Maria, whispered on behalf of a departed soul, is believed to lessen their time in purgatory's flames, speeding their passage towards salvation. This belief creates a profound, active connection between the living and the dead, a network of spiritual dependency and mutual support that extends beyond the veil. These rituals surrounding death, the washing, the wake, the burial in hallowed ground, the constant cycle of prayer, are not mere customs. They are the scaffolding built by faith and necessity in the face of overwhelming loss and uncertainty. They provide structure, meaning, and a path through the darkest moments. Unlike the modern age, where death is often managed in sterile environments, a private sorrow hidden from view, here, it is a public, communal event. It is integrated into the life of the village, a constant, visible reminder that this earthly existence is temporary. This palpable reality of your own mortality is not a cause for existential paralysis, but a spur. It shapes how you live, urging you towards piety, confession, preparation. Your hopes are fixed, not on extending your time in this difficult, fleeting world, but on securing your place in the eternal one to come. Was it faith that drove these elaborate rituals, this constant focus on the afterlife, or was it simply fear of what came after? The pale sun of March barely warms the frozen earth. You feel its hesitant return deep in your bones, a dull ache that is also a thrum of hope. Your life, like the seed buried waiting, is dictated not by bells or clocks, but by the relentless turning of the year. Time is not a line extending forward, but a wheel endlessly rotating. Spring is the miracle after the lean death of winter, the frantic surge of energy as the ground thaws enough for the heavy plow. Your hands, stiff from months of indoor tasks, burn with the effort of turning the soil, praying it yields to the blade like flesh yields to a surgeon's knife. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke, promise and exhaustion mingling. Summer arrives like a conquering army, hot, relentless, demanding. The sun beats down, your back aches from endless weeding. Your eyes scan the sky for rain clouds that are slow to arrive. Every sprout is a gamble, every pest a small, insidious demon sent to steal your future. Prayer feels most fervent under the burning July sun, not for abstract salvation, but for the immediate, tangible mercy of water, for protection from blight and storm, The rhythm is one of sheer, unthinking labor, a race against time and decay, hoping the good Lord and the saints favor your small patch of land over the myriad others begging for blessing. There is little room for thought beyond the next furrow, the next weed, the next prayer. Autumn is the climax, the terrifying, exhilarating peak, the harvest, a period of back-breaking work from sunup to sundown, the entire community mobilized. Scythes hiss through grain. Hands are cut and blistered, but there is a raw energy, a desperate hope. Will the yield be enough? Enough to pay the Lord, enough to feed the family through winter, enough to save a little for next year's seed? Anxiety hangs in the air thicker than dust, but if the harvest is good, there is a brief, glorious exhale, the harvest feast, a moment of rare, unbridled abundance, quickly extinguished by the looming shadow of the cold months ahead. This reliance on a single, annual event makes you acutely aware of your fragility. One bad harvest, one blight, one flood, and the cycle becomes a trap, not a comfort. Winter bites with a ferocity that drives you indoors. The world shrinks to the smoky confines of your dwelling. Tasks are those of maintenance and preparation, mending tools, weaving cloth, spinning thread by the meager firelight. Hunger is a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of your days. The short, dark days are punctuated by the brief flicker of light and hope offered by the Christmas season, a sacred pause before the long, slow wait for spring to begin again. This cyclical existence, this deep, almost religious connection to the earth's turning, is your entire reality. Time is marked by planting, growing, dying, and rebirth, mirrored by the holy calendar. There is no concept of progress as later ages would understand it, only repetition, adaptation, and survival within ancient patterns. It provides a strange sense of stability. The wheel always turns, but also a profound vulnerability. You are utterly, boundless, and perilous, humbling subject to forces you cannot control. Ask yourself, in a world where time itself is a circle, and your fate rests on the whims of sky and soil, what room is there for personal ambition, for charting your own course? Does the endless cycle feel like a prison or a promise? You stand at the edge of the field as the sun begins to set, casting long shadows over the stubble left after the harvest. The year has been hard. You felt the sting of the spring frost, saw the earth crack during the dry spell in summer, heard the church bells toll endlessly for those taken by the sickness that swept through the village like a hungry wolf. You paid your rent to the Lord, scraped together the tithe for the priest, but there is little left in your larder. Winter looms, a hungry beast waiting at the door, its breath already chilling the air. There is no guarantee you will survive it. You have seen neighbors die of hunger, their faces gaunt as skeletons, or consumed by sickness, their bodies racked with fever. You have seen the swift, brutal violence of the law, or simple human cruelty. Your body aches from years of relentless labor, marked by the crooked set of a broken bone, the chronic pain in your back from bending to the earth. You live in a world where unseen forces, God, the watchful saints, the lurking demons that ride the night air, vengeful spirits tied to the land, hold sway, where the natural world is unpredictable and often cruel. A divine test or a devil's whim? Human laws are harsh, arbitrary, and often tipped against you. You lack the comfort we take for granted, the security of knowing tomorrow will resemble today. The knowledge that explains the plague as a flea's bite rather than God's wrath. The power to shape your own destiny beyond the narrowest path. And yet, as you walk back towards the faint, welcome lights of the village, a thread of something resilient holds you upright. You do not despair, not entirely. Despair is a luxury you cannot afford. You will mend your tools by firelight, patching the hoe handle, sharpening the sickle. You will pray, a quiet, desperate conversation with a God who seems distant, but perhaps listens. You will ration your meager stores, making the oat cakes last, nursing the thin soup. You will help your neighbors if they fall ill, and they will, perhaps, help you when your own strength falters. You will huddle by the fire, listening to old stories, finding solace in the familiar faces of your family. Their breathing, a quiet reassurance in the dark. And come spring, if you are still alive, if the winter beast does not claim you, you will return to these fields. You will turn the soil once more, break up the heavy clods, drop seeds into the earth, and hope against the terrible odds. This enduring capacity for hope in the face of overwhelming hardship, this quiet, stubborn resilience etched into bone and spirit, is the true, forgotten legacy of your life and millions like you. It wasn't grand pronouncements or great battles that built the foundations of the future, but this simple act of planting, again and again, believing in a spring that might not come. Have we truly evolved so much from this fundamental human state? Or have we simply built systems and comforts, the supermarkets, the hospitals, the internet's illusion of control, that allow us to forget, for a time, how fragile existence is, how much we still depend on forces beyond our immediate control, how essential community and hope remain when the foundations tremble. We fear economic collapse, the invisible creep of climate change, new and invisible viruses, perhaps just rebranded, modern fears for the devil's breath on the wind. And still, in our own ways, we plant in hope. They had no legacy carved in stone, no names remembered in history books, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror or gratitude, every small act of kindness in a cruel world, built the very ground we now stand upon.